Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining me at Candlelight Vinyasa Yoga. My name is Julia, and I'll be guiding you through your practice today. Before we get started, I'm going to read our William & Mary Campus Recreation Waiver. In order to make these classes as freely accessible to our participants, we will be using a verbal warning and assumption of risk at the beginning of the class. Participation in this online class is voluntary. Physical activity programs may result in injury, and by participating, you assume the risk of injury that may result from your participation. We strongly recommend that you participate from a space that is suitable for this activity. For example, make sure that you have moved nearby furniture and other potential hazards. If you are participating in a yoga class or a class that involves lying on the ground, we recommend using a mat, or if you don't have one, a carpeted area. Participants are encouraged to stop if they experience pain or injury and should seek appropriate medical advice or care as needed. William & Mary Health and Wellness strongly recommends that each participant have an annual physical examination and follow the advice of your healthcare provider before practicing. Okay. So before we start pranayama, I invite you all to grab a water bottle or something that you have lying around the house, like a can or anything that you can use as a prop, like a speaker, anything that you have. But if you don't have anything, do not worry because it is not necessary. We're just going to use it to help with our peak pose, which is going to be half moon, Ardha Chandrasana. And once you have or have not grabbed your water bottle, let's go ahead and find a seat on your mat, sitting up nice and tall, stacking your shoulders over your hips. Allow the gaze to soften or the eyelids to close. And let's begin by emptying out all the breath from our lungs and taking a deep, slow inhale through the nose. And open the mouth for a cleansing exhale. Starting on empty, slow, deep inhale through the nose. Filling up your lungs as much as possible. Cleansing exhale. Once again, inhale through the nose. Cleansing exhale. Emptying out all the air from your lungs. And inhaling for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. And hold. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Feel free to continue this counting breath at your own pace, or just return to your natural breath cycle. Noticing how it may or may not be different from when you first stepped onto your mat this evening. And beginning to think of an intention for today's practice. An intention is a reminder throughout your practice. It can be a goal or an affirmation. It can be as simple as one word, such as compassion. And together, let's seal our intention with a deep inhale and exhale. Blink the eyes open, switch the crossing of the legs. Sitting up nice and tall, gliding your shoulder blades down the back and bringing your right ear towards your right shoulder. Slowly coming back through centered over to the left. Through center back to the right. And once again over to the left. Back to center, reach your arms overhead. Side stretching over to the right, keeping space between the shoulders and the ears. Keeping the weight evenly distributed between the sits bones. Through center to the left. Back to the right, maybe going a little bit deeper. And once more to the left. To center. And make your way into tabletop. Stacking your shoulders over your wrists and your hips over your knees. Feet right behind the knees. If you look behind, you should be able to see them. And dipping the back, bringing the gaze forward for cow. Leading with the belly button, rounding the back, tucking the chin to cat. Bringing your hips towards your heels for child's pose. Bringing your forearms to the mat and pulling through to cow bow. Coming up on the hands to cow, rounding the back to cat. Lower the hips down to your heels and pull through cow bow to cow. And moving through this cycle at your own pace for a few more rounds. And meeting in neutral. Reaching your left arm up towards the ceiling and threading your left arm through your right just to a hover as we prepare for thread the needle pose. Once again, reaching up towards the ceiling and threading through to a hover. Reaching up towards the ceiling and this time threading through all the way, resting your shoulder and your head on the mat and pressing your right hand into the mat up above your head. Keeping the hips evenly facing the top of the mat. Then use your right hand to lift yourself back up, reaching up towards the ceiling and lowering your left hand to the mat, reaching up with the right, threading through to a hover, opening back up, threading through to a hover, reaching up towards the ceiling, and this time threading the needle all the way through, resting your shoulder and your head on the mat, extending your left arm overhead and pressing your palm into the mat. Use your left hand to lift yourself back up, opening up towards the ceiling, lowering your palm to the mat, and sending your hips back to your heels for child's pose, resting your forehead on the mat. Lift the hips, tuck the toes, and send your hips up and back to downward facing dog. Paddling out the feet here, pressing into the roots of the fingers, chest coming towards your thighs. Releasing the head and shoulders, nodding the head yes, and shaking the head no. Coming up on the toes, bending the knees, and straightening the legs as you reach your heels towards the mat. Bring the gaze to the top of the mat and slowly walk forward to forward fold, generously bending the knees and grounding through the feet as you slowly come up with a flat back, reaching your arms overhead, upward salute, drawing your hands through heart center to Tadasana, mountain pose. Really grounding through the three corners of the feet, which are below the big toe mound, the little toe mound, and the heel, drawing up through the kneecaps, externally rotating your shoulders, and reaching through the crown of the head. Beautiful. Reaching your arms up towards the ceiling, and bending forward from the hip creases with a flat back, all the way to forward fold. Halfway lift, tracing the fingertips up the shins with a flat back, and fold. Plant your hands on the mat and step back to plank. Lowering your knees to the mat, untuck your toes, and keep your elbows hugging in by your sides as you lower all the way down. Resting your forehead on the mat. Pressing the tops of the feet into the mat, legs engaged, kneecaps lift. Without any weight in the hands, inhale, peel the chest off the mat to baby cobra, gaze lowered. Exhale, lower back down, press your hands into the mat, tuck the toes, send the hips up through tabletop to downward dog. Bring the gaze to the top of the mat and slowly walk forward to fold. Soft bend in the knees as you come up to upward salute, hands through to heart center, Tadasana. Coming all the way back up, folding forward. Halfway lift, back to fold. Plant your hands on the mat and step back to plank. Stacking your shoulders over your wrists, reaching through the crown of the head and pressing back through your heels, core engaged. Great job. Lowering your knees to the mat, untuck the toes, lower all the way down. Minimal weight in the hands as you peel the chest off the mat for baby cobra. Lower back down, press your hands into the mat, tuck the toes. Meeting in downward dog. Lifting your left leg to three-legged dog, dialing your pinky toe to point towards the mat so that your hips are level towards the mat. Bend the knee and draw it in towards the chest, plant your left foot, and lower the back knee and tucking the back toes to low lunge with your front knee stacked over your ankle, left hip drawing back and right hip drawing forward. Straightening the front leg as we move into runner's lunge, opening up the hamstring. And flowing through low lunge and runner's lunge at your own pace. Let's meet in low lunge. And you can stay here or bring one hand and then the other up onto the thigh, reaching your arms overhead. And lower your hands back onto the mat, tuck the back toes, lift the knee, and send the left leg back to three-legged dog. Lower your toes to the mat, and step forward to fold. Ground through the feet as you come all the way up to Tadasana, reaching up towards the ceiling and folding forward once again. Halfway lift, reaching through the crown of the head. Folding forward, plant your hands on the mat, step back to plank. Knees on or off the mat, lower all the way down. This time tenting your fingertips to either side of your shoulder with your elbows reaching up towards the ceiling. Peeling the chest off the mat for this Cobra variation. And if it feels good, dipping one shoulder and then the other. Lower back down, press your hands into the mat, tuck the toes, downward facing dog. Lift the right leg, bend the knee, planting the foot, and lower the back knee, untuck the back toes. We're in low lunge with your front knee stacked over your ankle. And beginning to straighten the leg to runner's lunge. Flowing through low lunge and runner's lunge. Meeting in low lunge. You can stay here or you can come up, reaching your arms overhead. Planting your hands on the mat, tuck the back toes, lift the knee. Back to downward dog. Bring the gaze to the top of the mat and step or float to the top of the mat. And forward fold. And coming all the way up. Bringing your hands to heart center. And sitting back into chair pose, Utkatasana. You should still be able to see the tops of your toes. Your chest is nice and lifted, shoulder blades gliding down the back. If you'd like, you can reach your arms overhead. Maybe sinking a little bit deeper. Amazing job. And folding forward. Halfway lift. Back to fold. Plant your hands on the mat and step back to plank. You can lower all the way down for Cobra, or you can join me in coming forward on the toes, lowering halfway to Chaturanga, and pulling forward to upward facing dog with your hips and your knees up off the mat, gaze forward. And we'll all meet in downward dog. Lifting your left leg to three-legged dog, bend the knee and open up the hip, stacking one on top of the other. Keeping the weight evenly distributed between your two arms as you draw circles with the ankle. And switching directions. Squaring the hips, drawing the knee forward and planting that foot, planting the back foot as well so your front heel is aligned with the back arch. Windmilling the arms up to warrior two. With your front knee over your ankle, your shoulders over top of your hips, grounding through the outer edge of the back foot. Toes will probably be coming in to help protect the knee. Extending your arms out to a T and gaze over the front fingertips. Shoulder blades gliding down the back. Extending your legs and reaching your arms up towards the ceiling. And sinking back into our warrior two, maybe going a little bit deeper this time. Pivoting onto the ball of the back foot, windmill your arms down and step back to downward dog. Lifting your right leg to three-legged dog, bend the knee, open up the hips, drawing circles with the ankle. And switch direction. Squaring the hips, coming forward with the knee, planting both feet, setting up for warrior two, and windmilling the arms up. Extending your legs and reaching the arms up towards the ceiling, sinking back into warrior two, gaze forward. Windmill the arms back down, stepping back to downward dog. And step or hop to the top of the mat and forward fold. Reaching up towards the ceiling and drawing your hands to heart center to Tadasana. Pausing for a breath cycle, feel free to grab water anytime. Upward salute, soft bend in the knees, folding forward. Halfway lift, back to fold. Plant your hands on the mat, step back to plank, and you can do any flow that we've done already, which is Cobra or upward dog. You can even do cat and cow or child's pose, whatever you like best. Go ahead and take that flow and meet in downward facing dog. Lowering the knees to and untucking the toes to tabletop. Extending your right leg behind you, planting your toes on the mat, and bringing your right hand to your hip as you open up the hips and open up the chest. And lifting your back leg, flexing your foot as if you were stamping the wall behind you. Hips stacked, shoulders stacked, core engaged, arm reaching up towards the ceiling. This is a great prep pose for half moon, which we will be doing towards the end of class. Really pressing through the lifted foot and reaching through the crown of the head. Maybe reaching your arm overhead for a nice side stretch. And lower back down to tabletop, tucking the toes, sending the hips back to downward dog. Lifting the left leg to three-legged dog, setting up for warrior two, windmilling the arms up. And flipping the front palm, reversing your warrior. Back to warrior two. Reaching forward and lowering your elbow to your thigh. Reaching your upper arm over your ear to extended side angle. Chest nice and open, creating space between the shoulders and the ears. Grounding through the outer edge of the back foot. Beautiful. And coming back up to warrior two. Windmilling the arms back down to the mat. Step back to downward dog. And step or float to the top of the mat. Reaching your arms up overhead. Drawing your hands to heart center. And sitting back into chair pose. Your arms can be at heart center or lifted up above. Let's try to lift the heels up off the mat, coming up on the toes. Make sure to keep the core nice and engaged to help keep your balance. Lowering the heels back down to the mat and fold forward. Halfway lift. Back to fold. Plant your hands on the mat and step back to plank. And this time, rolling over to the right side for side plank. Lifting up the hips, extending your upper arm towards the ceiling. You can have a kickstand right here with your upper leg, or if you'd like, you can extend the upper leg and bring your foot to your calf for tree pose, tree legs, or you can bring your foot up to the thigh if that's more comfortable. Stay with me. Beautiful. Undoing the legs, rolling back to plank, sending the hips back to downward dog. Lower your knees to the mat, untuck your toes, and send the hips back to child's pose, resting your forehead on the mat, arms down by your side. Reaching your arms out in front, lift the hips, tuck the toes, and send the hips back to downward dog. Look to the top of the mat, step or hop to forward fold. Reaching up towards the ceiling and drawing the hands to heart center. I realized we forgot to do the other side. Sitting back into chair. And folding forward, halfway lift, back to fold, step back to plank, taking a flow of your choice, and meeting in downward dog. Coming forward to tabletop, and this time, extending your left leg out, planting your toes on the mat, bring your left Hand to your hip as you open up the hips and open up the shoulders. Lifting the left leg. Extending your left arm up towards the ceiling. Shoulders open. Hips open. Grounding through the three corners of the foot. Engaging your core. And lower back to tabletop. I always forget. Tuck your toes and send the hips back to downward dog. Lift the right leg to three-legged dog. Planting the right foot on the mat and opening up to warrior two. Flipping the front palm over, reversing your warrior. Back to warrior two, reaching forward and lowering your elbow to your thigh. Reaching your left arm up over your ear. Extended side angle. Chest nice and open. Coming back to warrior two. Coming up on the ball of the back foot, windmilling your arms down. Stepping back to downward dog. Bend the knees and step or hop to the top of the mat. Reaching up towards the ceiling. Drawing your hands to heart center. Tadasana. Reaching up towards the ceiling, folding forward. Halfway lift. Back to fold. Plant your hands on the mat and step back to plank. This time rolling over to the left side for side plank. Taking whichever modification you need, or joining me in tree legs. Keeping a micro bend in the right elbow. Undoing the legs, roll back forward to plank and send the hips back to downward dog. Lower the knees to the mat, untuck the toes and send the hips back to child's pose. Reaching your arms down by your sides, and if you draw your hands up a little bit, like halfway, this is a nice wrist stretch. Reaching your arms out in front, lifting the hips, tucking the toes, sending the hips back to downward dog. And reaching your left hand to your right ankle for a twist. Other side, reaching your right hand to your left ankle. Back to center. Lifting your right leg to three-legged dog. Planting the right foot and opening up to warrior two. Reversing your warrior. And coming forward to extended side angle. Back to warrior two. Planting your hands on the mat, step back to plank, to downward dog. And bring the gaze to the top of the mat and step or float to forward fold. Grasping opposite elbows, bending the knees and rocking side to side from the hip creases. Release your arms, ground through the feet as you come into upward salute, drawing your hands to heart center, and sitting back into chair pose. This time twisting over to the right, hooking your elbow to the outer edge of your thigh, keeping your knees even. Come back to center over to the left. Back to center and fold forward. Halfway lift. Back to fold. Plant your hands on the mat and step back to plank. Taking a flow of your choice and meeting in downward dog. Lifting your left leg to three-legged dog. Bend the knee, draw it into the chest, and plant the left foot. Plant the right foot as well, opening up to warrior two. Stepping in a little bit with the back foot, straightening both legs by keeping a micro bend in the knees. Reaching forward, bumping your back hip out and lowering your fingertips to the shin for triangle pose, Triconasana. The gaze can be lower to your foot, or you can tuck the chin and bring your gaze to your extended upper arm. Really opening up the chest, keeping space between the shoulders and the ears. Staying light on the fingertips, using your core. And lift yourself up to standing. Bring your hands to your hips and parallel the feet to one another. Lengthening through the spine and folding forward from the hip creases to wide-legged forward fold. Reaching for the mat or for your ankles or shins. Shifting the weight a little bit more forward. Releasing the head and shoulders. Bring your hands to your hips, ground through the feet as you slowly come back up to standing. Widen the stance a little bit as you set up for warrior two on this side. Arms out to a T, gaze over the front fingertips. And stepping in a little bit with the back foot, straightening your legs, keeping a micro bend in the knees. Bumping out your back hip and reaching forward, lowering the fingertips to the shin for triangle. Lifting yourself back up to standing. Windmill the arms down to the mat, step back to downward dog. Lower the knees to the mat, untuck the toes and send the hips back to child's pose, resting your forehead on the mat. Reaching your arms out in front, lifting the hips, tuck the toes, send the hips back to downward dog. And this time, walk your hands to your feet until you get to forward fold. Rise to upward salute. And find Tadasana facing the top of your mat. Reaching your arms overhead and folding forward. Halfway lift, back to fold. And finding that water bottle that I told you to get at the beginning of class. If you don't have one, do not worry, but have that handy right at the top of your mat. Plant your hands on the mat and step back to plank. Taking a flow of your choice, if you would like, and meeting in downward dog. Lift the left leg to three-legged dog. Planting the foot and opening up to warrior two. Front heel aligning with the back arch. Knee stacked over ankle. And stepping in, once again, straightening the legs, coming forward to triangle, lowering your fingertips to your shin. And using your core to lift yourself back up to standing. Widen your stance again and bend the front knee into warrior two. Bring your right hand to your hip. Reach forward to extended side angle. But this time, reaching for your water bottle or whatever prop you grabbed. And we're gonna play with a little bit of weight shifting. So bending into the front knee, bending into the back knee, maybe coming forward with the back toes, maybe lifting them a couple inches off the mat. Still keeping the chest open, the right shoulder reaching up towards the ceiling. Reaching a little bit in front of the mat with your prop. Or if you don't have a prop, just have your hand on the mat. That is totally fine. And plant your back foot on the mat, windmilling back up to warrior two. And this time bringing your hands to your hips and paralleling the feet to one another. Elongate the spine and fold forward to wide-legged forward fold. Again, playing with the weight shifting, just bending into the right knee and then the left. At your own pace, just shifting back and forth. And while you're at it, go ahead and shift your prop to the other side of your mat so that you have it ready. Pause at center, bring your hands to your hips, ground through the feet as you slowly come up with a flat back. Opening up to warrior two. Really grounding through the outer edge of the back foot. And stepping in, straightening the legs, reaching forward, lower the fingertips, triangle. Use your core to lift yourself back up. Widen the stance, bending into warrior two once again. And bring your left hand to your hip, lower your elbow to your knee, to your thigh for side angle. And reach for either the mat or your prop as you play a little bit with the weight shifting, bending into your front knee and the back, starting to come forward, lifting the toes just a couple of inches. Engaging the core to help keep your balance. And plant the back foot on the mat, coming back up to warrior two. Pivot onto the ball of the back foot as you windmill the arms back down. Stepping back to downward dog. Lower your knees to the mat, untuck your toes, and relax in child's pose. Reaching your arms out in front, lift the hips, tuck the toes, send the hips back to Downward dog, and walk the hands to meet your feet. Reaching up towards the ceiling to Tadasana. And go ahead and shift your prop back to the other side of the mat for later. But first, meeting back in Tadasana, let's shift the weight into the left leg, bending into the right knee as we set up for tree pose for Shavasana. Externally rotate the right leg. Your heel can be kickstanded onto your ankle, or you can bring your foot to the calf or your foot to the thigh, just like we did in side plank. Your hands can be at heart center or lifted up above. Really reaching through the crown of the head as if you were growing your tree even taller. And grounding through the three corners of the standing leg as if you were growing your roots deeper into the mat. Beautiful. Drawing your hands to heart center. Lower your knee back to the mat. And shifting the weight into your right foot. Bend your left knee. Externally rotate up the thigh. Your heel can be kickstanded, or you can bring your foot to wherever is most comfortable, as long as you avoid putting pressure on the knee. And your arms can be at whatever position you prefer. Drawing your hands through heart center, guiding your leg closed, lower your toes to the mat. Meet in Tadasana at the top of the mat and reach your arms up overhead, folding forward. Halfway lift, back to fold, plant your hands on the mat, step back to plank, and take a flow of your choice, meeting in downward dog. Lift your left leg to three-legged dog, planting both feet on the mat, windmilling the arms up to warrior two. And coming into extended side angle, bringing your right hand to your hip and reaching for either the mat in front of you or your prop. As you start to shorten your stance, bringing your reach in front of the mat, and start to lift your back toes off of the mat as you open up the hips and the shoulders, stacking one on top of the other. Looking for a dristi, a focal point, something that's not moving that you can gaze at to help keep your balance. Really engaging the core and pressing the three corners of the right foot into the invisible wall behind you. If you dare, you can lift your right arm overhead up towards the ceiling. This is Ardha Chandrasana, half moon pose. Beautiful. Nope, it doesn't matter if you come out of the pose, just feel free to try again. Beautiful. Bring your hand to your hip and lower your right toes to the mat, coming back into warrior two. Oh, and let's see. Bringing your hands to your hips and windmilling or paralleling the feet to one another. But let's go ahead and set up for warrior two on the other side. Shifting your prop over towards the back of the mat so that it's there for you. Coming into extended side angle. And bring your left hand to your hip as you prepare for half moon. Again, bringing your fingertips to the mat or to your prop. Beginning to step in, reaching forward. Lifting the toes off the mat, opening up the hips and opening up the shoulders. Maybe you reach your arm up towards the ceiling with a micro bend in the standing leg. Core engaged, stamping your foot towards the invisible wall behind you. Beautiful. Bring your hand to your hip. Bend into your standing leg as you lower your back foot to the mat, going into warrior two. And windmilling the arms down to the mat, step back to downward dog. Lower your knees to the mat, untuck your toes, and sink back into child's pose, a well-deserved child's pose. Reaching your arms out in front, lifting the hips, tucking the toes, coming into downward dog. And once again, locking your hands to meet your feet. Rising up to Tadasana. And widening your feet to about mat width apart so that your heels are in and your toes are pointing out. Bring your hands to heart center and sit back into Malasana, or our yogi squat. You might be up here, which is totally fine. It doesn't matter how far you sink. You might be up on your toes, also totally fine. But we're keeping the core engaged, lifting through the core. Chest open. And bring your hands to the mat, making your way into tabletop. Tucking the toes, sending the hips back to downward dog. Lifting the left leg to three-legged dog. Bend the knee, draw it towards the chest. And lay your shin across the mat, lowering your left knee by your left wrist. Lower the back knee and untuck the back toes, staying up on the hands before we sink into pigeon. Flexing through the front foot to protect the knee. And if you'd like, you can lower onto your forearms. Coming up onto the hands. Tuck the back toes, lift the knee, and gently send your left leg back to three-legged dog, drawing circles with the knee, and switching direction. Lower your toes down to the mat and lift your right leg. Coming forward and laying your shin across the mat, lowering your right knee by your right wrist. Lower the back knee, untuck the back toes, flexing the front foot. And if you'd like, you can lower onto your forearms for pigeon. Coming up on the hands, tuck the back toes, lift the knee, and send the right leg back to three-legged dog. Drawing circles with the knee, and reverse. Lower your toes back onto the mat, lower the knees, and make your way into a seated position with your legs stretched out in front of you, head reaching up towards the ceiling, shoulder blades gliding down the back, Tadasana, staff pose, and folding it forward in any amount. Coming back up, bend the right knee and plant the right foot on the other side of the left knee. With your right knee pointing up towards the ceiling, hover your fingertips above the mat as you lengthen through the spine and twist from the core over to the right, keeping your chin over your chest, crossing your left arm over your right thigh, and lightly tenting your fingertips by your side. This is half Lord of the Fishes. If you'd like, you can bring your gaze over your right shoulder. Bring the gaze back to center. Bring the body back to center, uncross the legs, and bend your left knee, planting the left foot on the other side of the right knee. Hovering your fingertips above the mat, lengthen through the spine, and twist. Keeping your chin over your chest, lightly tenting the fingertips by your side. And if you'd like, you can bring your gaze over your left shoulder. Bring the gaze back to center, bring the core back to center, uncross the legs, and lower all the way down onto the mat. Bending the knees and drawing the knees in towards the chest. Keep your right knee hugging in towards the chest as you lay your left leg long on the mat, hugging your right knee in deeper towards the armpit with each exhale. Reach your right arm out to the side and draw your right knee across the body for a twist, keeping your shoulder blades planted on the mat and the gaze up towards the ceiling. Coming back to center, hug the left knee in towards the chest and lay the right leg long on the mat, hugging the knee in towards the armpit. Extend your left arm out to the side and draw your left knee across the body for a twist, keeping your shoulder blades planted on the mat. And come back to center. Go ahead and roll onto your right side and lift yourself up, because we're going to bring our mats up to the wall if you have one nearby, or to a chair. For our Shavasana, we're actually going to do legs up the wall. And if you prefer not to, or if you don't have a wall nearby, you can go ahead and take traditional Shavasana laying down. Otherwise, we're going to sit with our hips close to the wall so that we have room to kind of pivot onto our mats and extend the legs up the wall, flexing through the feet and extending your arms down by your side. Allow the gaze to soften or the eyes to close, relaxing the shoulders, relaxing, balling up your fists, and then relaxing your hands. Coming back to the breath and settling into your Shavasana. Start to bring awareness back into the body, drawing circles with the wrists, wiggling the toes, and gently bending the knees, hugging them into a ball and towards the chest, and rolling onto your right side, using your arm as a pillow. Pressing your hands into the mat to lift yourself up to a seat. With your palms at heart center, Namaste, yogis. Thank you all so much for joining me this evening. Again, my name is Julia, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening.